Today's guest, Ben Brucato, Vice President of Engagement at MEMA.
We see the aftermarket year over year. Traditionally, we see this 3-4% growth rate in the United States. And if the ICE fleet isn't necessarily growing at the paces that they were, in order to continue to get that growth, there needs to be some investment when it comes to, and whether it's EV hybrid or just ADAS systems even.
TecTalk, the Automotive Aftermarket Podcast.
Hi and welcome to another episode of the TecTalk Aftermarket Podcast, recorded live from the Apex show floor in Las Vegas. I'm Christian Müller, and today I'm joined by Ben Brucato, Vice President of Engagement at MEMA Aftermarket Suppliers. Ben has spent over a decade at MEMA helping suppliers navigate an increasingly complex industry, whether it's expanding into new markets, adapting to regulatory changes, or driving the right to repair movement forward. In this episode, we talk about global growth opportunities, the impact of government policies, and why sustainability is becoming a competitive advantage for suppliers. So without further ado, let's jump right into the podcast. Hi and welcome to the next episode of our TecTalk Aftermarket Podcast, here live in Las Vegas from the Apex show floor. And we have a new guest this morning. It's Ben Brucato from MEMA. Hi, Ben.
Hey, how are you?
Thanks a lot for making the time, because I know you've been very busy in the last days, because it's like the biggest Apex ever.
Yes, absolutely. No problem. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. For our listeners, could you introduce yourself? So who are you and what is your role at MEMA?
Sure, thank you. Ben Brucato. I'm the Vice President of Engagement for MEMA Aftermarket Suppliers. I've been with MEMA for about 10 years now, and I oversee anything related to our membership. One of the things that we say at MEMA is we connect members to what matters. And so I view my role as finding out what matters to members and then connecting them to that. I've been in the aftermarket my entire career. Started on the repair side, and I worked as a technician in a shop. And then I spent about 7 years on the manufacturing side, so with Airtex and UCI and the UCI Fram Group. And then about 10 years ago, I came over to MEMA to represent suppliers and help them with their business interests.
And does it help you having this hands-on experience in the market in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so helpful over the years when, talking to a member, whether they make a fuel pump, a water pump, or engine management, or any kind of products or technologies. I think it's helpful to know, I know how those products work. I've installed them, I've purchased them, I know the brands. And so much of supplier issues are related to some of their products and the changes in technology. And I know we'll talk about that, but understanding the products, I think, is so crucial. And then having worked for a supplier has really helped me understand and again be connected to what is going on within the supplier community.
And how did you start your career in the aftermarket? So how did you end up here? Because usually we talk about it with our guests. It's not very present in the everyday life. So all the people, they need to do their repairs.
Yeah.
But like automotive aftermarket, when you ask around on the street, a lot of people will not exactly know what it is.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. My father was a mechanic in the Navy, and growing up, he worked a lot on mechanical stuff, and I worked on vehicles. My parents then became missionaries actually in Italy, so I grew up in Bologna.
Okay.
So when I was 14, my dad took me to a Fiat repair facility and said, "Hey, can you hire my son in the summer and help him work on, learn how to work on cars?"
Yeah.
So I started working on Fiats, and that's kind of where I just got into it. Once I graduated from high school, went to college, I said, hey, I know how to work on cars, I might as well work in a shop. And so that's kind of got into the industry from a young age.
Great.
Yeah.
And for our international listeners, could you explain to them what exactly MEMA is and what you are doing for your members?
Sure. Yeah, so MEMA represents the suppliers, so the manufacturers, parts, tools, chemicals, equipment, and technology. And the majority, or really the membership, is based in North America. However, as the North American aftermarket continues to increase in challenges and just being very competitive market, it's so important that manufacturers export globally. And so MEMA has a division called the Overseas Automotive Council, the OAC, which is actually over 100 years old. And that group within MEMA is focused on helping manufacturers find new regions, new markets to sell products into. So that's one of the great things that MEMA does is we help find emerging markets and help them export product all across the globe.
And in the market, is there still the sense of the players that they need these organizations? Because you said you're already quite old organization in the market, but do the people still see the need? So do they see the need in working together, that you're stronger together and not doing stuff on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. Mainly because the market in the U.S. is so competitive and there's so many players. There's so much opportunity globally and in some developing regions to sell their products into. The reality is, though, some of the companies, some of our members are fairly small. It might be a family-owned company. Yeah. They might have a very long and great business history here in the United States, but they don't know how to get to Peru. They don't know how do I start selling in Guatemala or South Africa or any region in the world. It can be a little intimidating to expand globally, but there's so many great opportunities. It's probably easier than ever in some cases to do business globally. And so that is something that we try to do at MEMA, to try to help them learn about the market. We work very closely with the Department of Commerce. There's gold key programs. We've done trade missions to different countries to just show, hey, there's a desire and a demand for aftermarket products, especially some of the big brands and well-recognized brands in the United States. And so finding those markets is crucial to growing the business.
And in terms of these expansions, is there like a natural way so that most of the players are going south to Central America, South America, but you're also supporting them in finding new opportunities, I suppose, in Europe, Africa,
Absolutely,
Middle East, Asia?
Yeah, it's obviously going into Latin America is easier. It's closer just geographically. The shipping is also made easier, and so. But yeah, absolutely, we do a lot of business. It's incredible the aftermarket presence in the Middle East. Yeah, it's a lot of countries in the Middle East that a lot of our members do business with, and even through some of the other shows and other trade shows across the globe is a good way to enter into some of those markets. So we try to partner and do things like that globally.
So in your opinion, what are currently the biggest challenges automotive aftermarket suppliers are facing in the US?
So, in the U.S. and as it pertains to doing business globally, the geopolitical landscape is very difficult, right? And so whether it's wars with different countries, changes in presidency and elections, tariffs, of course, and even exchange rates, and how that puts pressure on the credit for different buyers internationally. Those are some really big challenges. And so I think it's important MEMA stays on top of these challenges, works with companies like XM Bank and other organizations to make sure we're providing members with the resources and how to address those challenges for sure.
And you're also a body that works and represents on a government level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. MEMA has 3 offices. We have an office in Raleigh, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and Detroit. And so we have a full team of lobbyists and government advocacy representatives in D.C. that are very active in helping both our members domestically and globally, especially, for example, around tariffs, supply chain issues, a lot of nearshoring, a lot of companies coming back to the United States or setting up manufacturing in Latin America and just navigating those challenges, how to get product across the border and what that means.
How do you succeed in keeping the awareness high on a political level for the aftermarket? Because for many people, they don't think about the aftermarket. They know car manufacturers because they all drive cars. They kind of also understand that there are workshops they go to. But I guess for the politicians in their daily work, it's quite easy to lose focus on our market. And we see it also like in Europe as well. We have Klepa from the parts manufacturer side and Figefa from the trade. So how difficult is it to keep the awareness high on a political level?
So, and I'm glad you mentioned, companies and associations like CLEPA. That has been a really important thing for MEMA, to build relationships with the associations across the globe and working with them and knowing their challenges. We have actually one of our events, an international event that we have. It's in February 2021 in Miami. It's our global summit. So we have a panel there with the head of INA, with the head of Partes in Colombia. We also have Juan Cantarella, who's the head of the Argentinian Association, and talking about the different regions. And so that has been really helpful, connecting with other trade associations, working together to address the market. Because, as I mentioned, the aftermarket is becoming more and more global. To stay relevant and to stay profitable, companies have to export. And in order for us to stay connected there, it's important to keep those relationships. And also with many of our suppliers and partners, like Tech Alliance and many others have a global footprint. Working with them, understanding the challenges and the things that they're working on a global level is so important for us. We really are a global industry.
Yeah, and I guess that's especially what you said for your smaller members, that they also understand that there's a lot of opportunity in this market, and it's way bigger than beyond the US borders.
For sure, absolutely.
Another movement you're supporting is the Right to Repair movement. Can you give our listeners an update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is, of course, our number one initiative. We strongly believe that consumers should have the ability to choose where and with what parts they repair their vehicles and how they do that. So Right to Repair is a must-win for us. The aftermarket would change incredibly if this bill is not introduced and passed, but we're very confident that it will do so. It's a popular movement within consumers, and I think that is on our side, in our favor. I think the more we spread the word to consumers and make them aware that the original equipment manufacturers are trying to shut the independent aftermarket out, and that could have terrible repercussions, not only for shops all across this country. But I like to think of it this way. If you live in rural America in a very small town, but you happen to drive a Land Rover, you might go to your local shop to get basic repairs or brakes or whatever. Well, what happens if you have to return to the dealership and the dealership is 2.5 hours away?
Yeah,
that would cause a huge disruption in the economy. And so we're very active with that, and we're working on getting that across the line.
Yeah, and also about the right to access the data from the manufacturers. And is it kind of the same hurdles you're having here like we have in Europe? Because like in Europe, or I guess globally, what they keep saying is, it's about cybersecurity, it's about safety.
Yeah, sure.
You can't handle our data, you can't get access to the vehicle.
Yeah, that's the same in the United States. That's the defense that the OEs use of cybersecurity. Anybody that looks into that knows we use Venmo, right? Every day we pay Venmo. That's not a bank. It's a third-party company, but it's secure. Nobody feels threatened to use that. So there are so many models already in place where a good infrastructure and a good process can protect vehicle and consumer data. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, we could have said that might have been more of a concern, but this is 2024, almost 2025. We have ways to make sure that cybersecurity is not an issue.
And on a political level, so we are now 2 days after the election night. So how does a change in government affect all these efforts? So is it that you have to kind of start over again because like now the Senate has changed, the government will change, or can you pick up on the work you already did?
Yeah, we can definitely continue picking up. Staff changes are always a disruptor, but one of the great things about having an office and a team in Washington, D.C., they're prepared for these things. This is nothing new. Our office, in fact, I was just talking to our Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, and she was talking that, hey, we were prepared for this. We knew that the Trump administration would be probably more aggressive on tariffs, for example. So they have already started the conversations about what that looks like. We just need to get more signatures and get this bill passed. But there's always hurdles, but that's why I think the trade association is so important, so that we can get those hurdles. But I think we're obviously going to continue ahead and make sure that this passes.
And regarding OEs, what we see in Europe is now also that manufacturers are expanding into the aftermarket with their own repair shops, with their own line of aftermarket parts. How is the situation here in the US?
Yeah, it's same. I mean, if you look at all of or the majority of the OEMs, they have their foot in the aftermarket as well, right? And they have their brands, all makes on all models.
Very lucrative business.
Absolutely. So it's the question of volume over margin. So there's definitely more volume on the OE, but the margin is pretty good on the aftermarket. And I think that the industry, we're too far ahead in this industry to make hard lines of division and not work together. At our Vision conference years ago, we had an executive from Toyota, and he said, the aftermarket is absolutely necessary. People love to drive Toyotas because they last a long time. Yeah. The value of a Toyota Camry is that it lasts a long time because there's the aftermarket to repair it. Yeah. I don't think we need to, one against the other. I think there needs to be an opportunity to work together, and at the end of the day, to just help consumers get to work, and go on vacation, whichever means they feel necessary or what they can afford.
Yes, and you just said it. So we keep the cars on the roads longer.
Yes.
So you could say, like, the aftermarket, we've been sustainable before it was cool.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So, and sustainability is a big topic right now. So what are the current initiatives you're having regarding that?
Yeah, so MEMA has a Center for Sustainability.
Yeah.
We have a great representation of remanufacturers within MEMA Aftermarket. Some incredible companies that are just really leading the way on innovation. And we have a Reman Roadshow every year, and we go and a big conference for our remanufacturing members and talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that they have. And we did some really cool tours this year of plants in Greenville, South Carolina that are doing a lot of remanufacturing. So there's a lot of great opportunities. And I think that as innovation continues to grow and some of these companies become more and more agile and understanding, and how can we repurpose this? How can we reduce scrappage, and how can we find better ways to deal with cores and things like that? And so MEMA is definitely dedicated to that and supporting those members and helping them move along. And I think it's a must and an incredibly important thing, and MEMA very much stands for that.
And on a consumer level, do you see that consumers are also picking up on that? Because like 2 years ago, I had John was at the podcast, John Califu, and we were talking about the naming, that he didn't like the name remanufacturing because it's not like, because it sounds too much like recycling.
Sure.
And it's actually the remanufactured part is at least as good as the initial part, if not even better, because like what could happen, or also in the lifespan of the part, you see some failures, and then the remanufactured part is even made better in that. So is there awareness on the customer level?
Yeah, I think the awareness on the customer level has grown tremendously. Even from when I was working on the service side and in the shops, most customers did not want a remanufactured or rebuilt component, especially if the price difference wasn't that. But as it's become a concern for consumers on wanting to be more green and sustainable and purchasing products that stand for those initiatives, we see that consumers are more open to using products that have been remanufactured, repurposed. And like you said, the technology and the products are better. I used to always say when I worked on the fuel pump side, we would address, people say, oh, I don't want an aftermarket fuel pump. I want an OE. And I'd say, when you buy a brand new car and a fuel pump is in the tank, you've got a clean fuel tank, you got clean fuel lines, a new fuel filter, clean gas. Well, yeah, it's easy for that pump to pump gas, no problem. But now you take a pump and put it in a 150,000 mile old vehicle. It's got a tank that's 150,000 miles old and lines that are old. And so you need to create and manufacture a pump that will work under those conditions. And that's what the aftermarket does. They say, hey, our pumps need to work better than the OE because they're in a much harsher environment, and we want them to last another 150,000 miles. Same thing with remanufactured parts, is that we say, hey, okay, I see this part. Why did it fail to begin with? Okay, well, the OE could have never known that after 150,000 miles
No.
that part would have failed that way. So now we know that when you have that history, and suppliers can say, hey, let's innovate. Let's make sure that this product is better than OE. And so I think consumers are starting to learn that as well.
Yeah. In the broader sense of sustainability, there's also electric vehicles,
Yeah.
battery electric vehicles.
Sure.
So we've been told for quite some time now that they are coming, that they are flooding the market.
Yeah.
We now know that maybe that change is going a bit slower
Yeah.
than expected. But still, how do you prepare, or do you help your members adapting to this change, which will come?
Yeah, no, great. That's a great question. And so, we can never be over prepared, right? So that's one thing. And yes, ICE vehicles are going to be on the road for a long time still to come, and the adoption of EVs is maybe slower than projected, and I think that's perfectly fine. That's okay. What our message to members is, even on EVs, there's a lot of repair products, right?
Yeah.
Vehicles are heavier. You still have front end, tires, brakes, and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely opportunity for our suppliers. But the important thing is, some of our suppliers have been in business, for over 100 years. So potentially evolving into a different product or evolving into a different company can take quite a long time. And so what we're doing is we're just informing and educating members on, here's where the growth opportunities are going to be. We see the aftermarket year over year. Traditionally, we see this 3-4% growth rate in the United States. And if the ICE fleet isn't necessarily growing at the paces that they were, in order to continue to get that growth, there needs to be some investment when it comes to, and whether it's EV hybrid or just ADAS systems, even ICE vehicles. We just want to inform members, make sure that they know what's coming ahead, and that there's some great opportunities, especially on some of these EV. There's some great opportunities for suppliers.
Yeah, totally. That's the right point of view, to see not the challenges but the opportunities it brings to us. And I guess we've seen at the breakfast session, we saw
absolutely.
a statistic that that there are even more repairs needed currently with the electric vehicles.
Yeah, that is a pretty staggering thing that we found, is that on the service side, there's actually seems to be more failures, and then the products are higher priced too. So there's opportunity for that and growth for suppliers there for sure. And then, this isn't anything new. I mean, we've seen the changes in technologies, from just points and condensers to OBD1, OBD2, and all that growth there. And every point, that was a hurdle for the aftermarket. Will we have access? Will we be able to get that? Will we be able to fix these vehicles? And we see that not only can the aftermarket fix and repair those vehicles and produce products, but they've now gone out to creating some of the technology and improvements on some of the vehicles. So it's an exciting road ahead. I'm excited to be part of the industry and to see these changes and do whatever we can to continue to stay relevant.
Yeah. And in your global view and global experience you're having, how does the US aftermarket differ from the aftermarket in Europe or maybe in Asia? So what makes it unique?
Yeah, several things. And of course, every region is different. But what are the great things in the United States? And I've lived all over the world and grew up in Europe and in Italy.
Do you miss the Italian food from
yeah, that is. I absolutely miss the Italian food. There's some actually pretty good places here in Vegas, believe it or not, that have some pretty good Italian food. But one of the great things about the United States is this, it's a culture of DIY, right? So there's a lot of people that like to work on their own cars, and not only the DIY, but it's, we're pro-business here. It's fairly easy in the United States compared to the rest of the world to start a business. So you want to be a shop owner and open a shop, it's not very difficult. Where some of those barriers really exist, especially in Europe, it's not as easy to start your own business, there's a lot of regulation. The DIY market is very different. And so I think having those two main cultural differences, where if I want to work on my own car, I want to do oil change in my driveway, I can do that. If I want to even replace brakes, I can still do that.
Maybe I will call the police in Germany.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, no, it's true. And so it's just a different mindset. So that plays to the aftermarket in the U.S. And then also, it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty easy to open a shop. My wife is actually owns a tractor trailer repair facility, which is, interesting. So, But, it's a family business and they do really well. That would be much more of a challenge in other countries. So I think that plays very well. And I think that's why the aftermarket is so strong in the U.S. because culturally it kind of feeds into that.
And so is there also a difference in who is making the purchasing decision? Because like in Europe, it's often made from the workshop, but I can imagine in the US, it's often made by the actual driver who then says, I want this part, or even brings his part to the workshop.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a different buying model. Even the distribution was different. You have consumers that recognize brands still, and there's different industries that help that. Whether it's the racing industry and NASCAR and Indy and different things like that promote the growth of some of the technical colleges. Some of our members have great programs, like Snap-on has a really good program for students and getting them exposed to their tools and the things that they provide. There's just some really great programs that our suppliers can do that help that in the U.S. for sure.
And as we're coming now to the end of our little session here, we always look ahead.
Yeah.
What are your expectations for the next 5 to 10 years for the American aftermarket? What will be the opportunities and challenges your members will be facing?
There are quite a few, and one that just comes to mind more prevalent, and I just had this discussion with a member this morning, is the labor force is changing significantly. Even this week at Apex, I've run into a lot of people that said that this was their last year here, or maybe they had one more year left. And
boomers are leaving.
Yeah, exactly, and retiring. And so that's a concern because there's so much knowledge that will be exiting the market over the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know the stats, but I feel like it's greater than in previous years. And so what are we doing to absorb that knowledge? What mentorship programs are there? I mean, I've been so blessed and fortunate to learn from so many great leaders in this industry, and they've passed on so much. And so I think that's really important, and that's going to change how this industry operates. We talk about the aftermarket being a relationship business, right? And it still very much is that. Relationships might have changed how we do relationships, but it's still very much a relationship business. And so I think the people are what make this industry. So I think it's going to be really important that specifically younger people are intentional about gathering information, wisdom, insights from those that are leaving, and to even on a respect basis, they have so much knowledge. Go out there and get it so that we can continue the legacy that so many leaders have put before us.
Okay. I guess that's some nice insights on closing our session here. Ben, thanks a lot for taking part, for taking the time, because I know you're pretty busy and you will be busy, I guess, today and tomorrow.
No, this was a privilege. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of the TecTalk Aftermarket Podcast. A big thanks to Ben for the great conversation and insights live from Apex. From right to repair to global expansion, it's clear that suppliers who adapt and collaborate will be the ones shaping the future of our industry. If you like these episodes, follow the TecTalk Aftermarket Podcast in your podcast app and stay connected on LinkedIn for more updates and discussions. Thanks for listening and see you next time.